There are things we think we understand so well, but only when we see through the eyes of a child do we realize we were wrong. A successful mother, busy closing million-dollar deals, believed she had it all. And her little daughter, innocent, growing up in comfort, seemed to know nothing about the world beyond. Until one day, the two left the city together, to a distant countryside where there was no air conditioning, no Wi-Fi, no tall buildings. But there was something else, strange and warm. And it was there that the little girl saw something that grown-ups sometimes spend their whole lives missing. A gentle lesson, powerful enough to change how one sees wealth and happiness. This is a story about a journey, a quiet encounter, and a profound lesson, spoken from the pure heart of a child. It was a 10-year-old girl, born and raised in a wealthy family in the city. Her mother was a successful businesswoman, always busy with meetings, contracts, and long business trips. Their apartment sat high above the city in a luxurious high-rise, where everything was controlled by smart technology, and had her own spacious room, a cleaning robot, expensive toys, and a wardrobe overflowing with designer gifts. Every day, she was chauffeured to school, dined on gourmet meals prepared by a private chef, and rarely had to lift a finger. But still, something weighed heavily on her mother's heart. She worried that her daughter was growing up in a world of too much comfort, so much so that she might lose her sense of gratitude and appreciation, and often complained of being bored despite having everything. Sometimes she'd get upset when the Wi-Fi was slow or when her food wasn't made just right. Her mother knew she had given her daughter everything, except the chance to truly understand what life is like beyond their polished world. Then one day, during a parent-teacher meeting, Anne's mother unexpectedly ran into an old college friend. Mai now lived in a rural village in central Vietnam, working as a farmer and raising 3 young children. Though she didn't have much in terms of material wealth, her eyes sparkled with a kind of peace that was hard to find in the city. They chatted, laughed, and said goodbye with warm smiles. And in that moment, a thought struck Anne's mother like a flash of light. Yes, what if I took in somewhere completely different? Let her see the world with her own eyes instead of just hearing about it. A week later, she told him, "This weekend, we're going on a special trip. No malls, no fancy resorts." And frowned. "Then where are we going?" "To visit Aunt Mai's countryside. There's no air conditioning, no tablets, but maybe, just maybe, you'll find something I lost a long time ago." And reluctantly agreed, not quite understanding why her mom would want to go somewhere so boring. What she didn't know was that this trip would change both their lives forever. The bus came to a stop at the beginning of a red dirt road, leading into a small village tucked between endless green fields, and stepped off, looking around uncertainly. The wind rustled through rows of tall areca palms, and birds chirped brightly on the thatched rooftops. She took a deep breath, and for the first time, smelled the scent of earth mixed with wild grass, a smell no city could ever offer. Aunt Mai walked up with a warm smile, followed by her 3 children clinging playfully to her shirt, their eyes sparkling with curiosity and kindness. The house wherein and her mother would stay for a few days sat humbly beneath a large mango tree. There was no air conditioning, no TV, and no Wi-Fi. Instead, there were roosters crowing, birds calling to one another, and the rustling of dry leaves each time the wind passed through. That first night, Anne tossed and turned, unable to sleep. With no phone, no internet, it felt like she'd been cut off from the world. But something strange began the next morning. One of the kids, little T, invited into the pond to catch snails. Reluctantly, she followed. She never expected to burst out laughing when she slipped and fell into the water for the first time. The group erupted in laughter, pure, ringing laughter like morning dew on a leaf. By noon, they were picking corn, lighting a fire with dry straw, and gathering around a pot of sour soup made with fresh tamarind, a flavor so wild and delicious, and had never tasted anything like it before. That afternoon, the children led her up the hill behind the house, from the top, and saw golden rice fields stretching all the way to the horizon. The sun slowly dipped behind the bamboo grove, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple. She sat on a stone quietly. For the first time, it wasn't city lights, honking cars, or flashing screens that moved her heart. It was silence. That night, the whole family gathered around a dinner table lit by an old oil lamp. No one was glued to a phone. Aunt Mai told stories from her childhood. The kids took turns sharing tales from school and sat quietly, watching them laugh, then turned to her mother. It had been so long since she'd seen her eat slowly, her eyes gentle, not rushing to check the time or glance at emails. The days passed in a blink and began waking up early, walking barefoot, skipping rope, and calling the other kids friends. She never imagined that in a place with nothing modern, her heart could be filled by something so simple and so real. On the bus ride back to the city, and sat close to her mother, still clutching a small wooden spinning top that little T had given her as a parting gift. Her face no longer showed the boredom or frustration she had when they first arrived. Instead, there was a quiet, thoughtful look, a kind of calm that made her mother feel as if her daughter had somehow grown older in just a few short days. Dusk was falling as the bus rolled past familiar streets. Streetlights swept across the windows, casting soft glows over Anne's distant gaze. Her mother gently asked, her voice light as the wind, "So what did you think of the trip?" And turned to her and smiled, a soft, gentle smile her mother had never seen before. "I loved it, Mom. I didn't expect that in a place with nothing. I'd find everything." "Everything?" her mother asked, surprised. "Yes, everything our house doesn't have." Her mother blinked, unsure what she meant, and continued, slowly. "At home, I have my own room, but I usually eat alone, sleep alone, play alone. At Aunt Mai's, we ate together, slept under one blanket, and played until we forgot the time." She looked out the window again, then said softly, "We have air conditioners, but they have a cool, flowing river. We have night lights, but they have a moon so bright it shines straight into their room. You're always worried about strangers, so we have fingerprint locks and cameras. But they don't need any of that. They have neighbors and friends." Her mother fell silent, then turned to her and whispered gently, "I think we're the ones who are poor, Mom." In that moment, her mother's heart felt as though it had been quietly squeezed. The words, spoken so innocently by her daughter, cut deep into a silent emptiness she had long tried to ignore. She had believed she was giving her child the very best, the finest schools, the safest home, the newest gadgets. But she had forgotten the most basic gift of all, the feeling of truly living. The bus pulled into the parking garage of their luxury apartment building. Her mother said nothing. She simply reached for her daughter's hand. For the first time in years, she realized she needed to learn how to live again, from the very child she thought she was teaching. A little girl, just returned from the so-called poor world, carrying in her heart a lesson no international school could ever teach. A week had passed since they returned from the trip, and the rhythm of city life had swept the mother back into its familiar current. Meetings, emails, contracts. On the surface, everything seemed unchanged. But deep within her, something had quietly shifted. Each night, as she walked past Anne's room, she found herself pausing a little longer. Gone were the nights when Anne curled up with her iPad, eyes glued to glowing screens. Now, her daughter sat quietly at her desk, sketching fields of rice, the soft faces of village children. Images the mother had never seen before in Anne's usual neon-colored drawings of princesses and castles. One evening over dinner, the mother asked casually, "Do you still remember Aunt Mai's house?" And nodded immediately. "I miss it a lot. I miss the smell of hay, the roosters in the morning, and the game with the little pebbles." The mother smiled gently, then asked, almost testing the waters, "If you could choose, where would you rather live?" And looked up at her, eyes sincere and steady. "I want to live somewhere I feel loved, not just somewhere that has the most stuff." The words struck the mother like a quiet thunderclap. They weren't bitter, they weren't accusatory, just true. And yet, they forced her to face a truth she had been avoiding for years. All this time, she had worked so hard to give her daughter everything, but she had forgotten the one thing her child needed most, her. Not the successful woman on magazine covers, but the mother who sat down to dinner, the one who told bedtime stories, the one who laughed at silly jokes and made paper boats on rainy days, and continued, her voice slow but deep, like someone who had seen more than her years. At home, I have everything and still feel like something's missing. But at Aunt Mai's, I didn't have anything that was just mine, yet I always felt full. The mother sat in silence. She had never imagined that a child could speak such truths. Truths that held up a mirror to her own limits, her own blind spots, in the way she loved. That night, after Anne had fallen asleep, the mother opened her laptop. But instead of checking contracts, she typed into the search bar, "Weekend mother-daughter activities. Ways to bond with your child through small daily moments." And in that quiet moment, she finally understood. The most valuable treasure she'd ever had wasn't in her vault or in her stock portfolio. It was the little girl peacefully sleeping in the next room, the very one who had just taught her the greatest lesson of her life. Since that trip, and her mother began living a different kind of life. Not because they moved houses, nor because they bought anything new, but because they finally started to truly see each other. On weekends, instead of going to shopping malls or sitting in separate corners glued to their devices, the two of them would cook together and helped wash vegetables, while her mother taught her to make simple dishes filled with love, like the crispy egg her mom used to make when it was little, or the sour soup that reminded them of meals at Aunt Mai's. Each afternoon, instead of rushing off to luxury yoga classes, her mother would invite in on walks through the nearby park. They talked about school, work, dreams, and even their quiet fears. Side by side, step by step, her mother began to keep a journal, not about meetings or deals, but about her journey as a mom. Each page captured a new lesson she had learned from her daughter, because she had finally understood. Sometimes, children are the wisest teachers. They don't teach through theories, but through the way they feel and love life, fully and honestly. One evening, after reading a book together under the soft yellow glow of a lamp, and turned to her mother and asked, "Mom, are we rich?" The mother didn't answer right away. She looked at her daughter, smiled gently, pulled her into a warm embrace, and whispered, "We're very rich because we have you." In that quiet moment, no amount of money could ever measure the worth of that sentence. Richness wasn't the number in their bank account, wasn't the high-rise apartment, wasn't the luxury vacations stamped in passports. True wealth was having someone to love, a place to come home to, and the kind of moments that made your heart feel full. And Story was never just about a trip to the countryside. It was a journey back to the values forgotten in this fast-paced, modern world, where people own more than ever, but feel less and less. That simple journey didn't change the world, but it did change the world inside one mother's heart. And maybe, just maybe, we all need a journey like that. Not to go somewhere more extravagant, but to return to ourselves, to listen, to understand, and to learn how to love again the little things we've overlooked. Because sometimes, it's within the simplest things that real happiness has been quietly waiting all along. Modern life can offer us so many things: comfort, speed, endless opportunities. But sometimes those very things make us lose sight of the most precious, simple values. A meal filled with laughter, a look that says, "I see you," or an afternoon spent quietly together without rushing anywhere. And in her mother's story isn't really about being rich or poor in the usual sense. It's about waking up, that moment when you realize material things are just the outer shell. True happiness lies in the invisible things the heart can feel. A hug, a gentle question, time given fully and freely to one another. That's what makes us truly rich in this world. And maybe at some point in our own lives, we too should step away from the rush, not to go far, but to take a different kind of trip, one that brings us back to our own hearts. Because in the end, happiness doesn't depend on how much we have. It depends on how deeply we cherish what's already right here.